Good evening. Thank you all for joining me and for our special guest this evening. September is Hunger Action Month, and I am honored to host tonight's conversation on food security. We have four panelists that are joining us tonight to talk about food systems and food security through the lens of their industry. We're bringing the perspectives of agriculture, farmers, and ranchers through Secretary Blayne Arthur, experiences of suppliers like Lopez Foods and KiZE, and emergency food distributors for those in need, like our regional food banks. The COVID-19 pandemic has put a strain on our families and seniors who rely on local and federal programs to enhance their food security. Oklahomans are returning to work, but our most vulnerable, our citizens, should not worry about where their next meal is going to come from. We'll be talking about several programs this evening that have helped Oklahomans weather the COVID pandemic. I'd like to highlight those tonight and talk about the discussions in detail on the call. The first is the USDA Farmers to Families Food Box Program. Through the initiative, USDA partnered with regional and local food distributors whose workforce was significantly impacted by the closure of restaurants, hotels, and other food service entities. The USDA purchased more than $3 billion in fresh produce, dairy, and meat products to be distributed. On the ground in Congressional District 5, my team worked with several church groups to help distribute these USDA food boxes and help secure additional truckloads of the boxes for the district when our federal agencies had decided to send boxes to surrounding states. I heard from constituent Pastor Derek Scobie of Ebenezer Baptist Church and Pastor Patricia Johnson from the United Methodist Church in Luther about the continued need for food boxes in their communities, and I worked with the USDA and local distributors to help ensure more food boxes came to Oklahoma and to Congressional District 5, where the need was great. In addition, I worked with the Oklahoma Department of Human Services and the U.S. Department of Ag on an agreement to extend federal emergency SNAP benefits through the end of 2021. This solution was the extension of a lifeline for Oklahoma families so they can continue to put food on the table as they recovered from the economic impact of this pandemic. It also brought millions of tax dollars back home to help our fellow Oklahomans. In addition, in the Oklahoma State Senate, I authored Senate Bill 506, the Healthy Food Financing Act, which created a public-private partnership program to eliminate the state's food deserts by encouraging construction and expansion of grocery stores, corner stores, farmers markets, and more. The legislation was intentionally broad to accommodate a wide variety of projects across the state. For smaller communities with strong ties to ag, it might make more sense for them to work with their local growers to bolster a really strong farmers market. In more urban communities, but also rural, a more mobile market or a food truck with fresh produce and groceries could be a better option. As the act was written, it allowed for the state to access USDA federal dollars as well as allow for private money to flow into the initiative without the contribution of state funds. As we continue the discussion tonight, we'll focus on these programs in more detail. But now I would like to introduce our special guests. If you'd like to ask a question of tonight's panelist, please press *3 to be put in the queue. Again, *3 will get you into the queue to ask questions to tonight's panelists. First up is Secretary Blayne Arthur with the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Blayne was sworn in by Governor Kevin Stitt as the Secretary of Ag, the state's first female to hold this position. She acts as the governor's chief advisor on policy development and implementation related to ag, food, and forestry, and holds the titles of Oklahoma Commissioner of Ag and the president of the Oklahoma State Board of Agriculture. Blayne, if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and the role with the Department of Ag and the impact of the industry on food systems and supporting nutrition in our great state.
Sure. Good evening, Congresswoman. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on and visit about something certainly that's very important to all of us as farmers and ranchers here in the state of Oklahoma. My husband is a full-time cattle producer. I have an ag background myself, so we understand the challenges that come before farmers and ranchers, but ultimately our goal is to produce quality, affordable food for all Oklahoma and certainly for folks in the United States and across the world. Many of the programs that you mentioned work in tandem with our producers because we've got to make sure to have access to those markets to get that product to consumers wherever they are. And certainly there's lots of challenges that we navigate through in that, and we saw a lot of them this last year. So certainly glad to be on this evening with everyone.
Thank you so much, Secretary Arthur. Next up is Stacy Dykstra, Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma. Prior to joining the Regional Food Bank in October of 2020, Stacy served as the Executive Director of the Smart Start Central Oklahoma, nonprofit focused on early childhood education. At Smart Start, Stacy participated in more than 100 community meetings in which she presented, facilitated, or served as the coordinator. She has trained hundreds of professionals serving young children and their families and taught various college courses focused on family support. Stacy holds a PhD in instructional leadership and an academic curriculum from the University of Oklahoma. Stacy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Representative Bice. What an honor it is to be here with this great group. Just a little bit about the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma. We were founded in 1980. We are the state's largest charitable food nonprofit and part of the Feeding America network. Our service area includes 53 counties in central and western Oklahoma, and we are so fortunate to work with more than 1,300 community-based partners to help provide nutritious food to our neighbors who are facing food insecurity. Last year, we distributed more than 57 million pounds of food, which is a record amount for us. We have programs that provide food assistance for children, seniors, and hardworking families struggling to make ends meet. We're committed to providing nutritious food and providing access to resources to ensure people find paths to self-sufficiency. This past 18 months, we served many people who had never needed food assistance. Through this experience, we also discovered that when all levels of government and food banks are doing their part and investing in the people of Oklahoma, as we have done during this pandemic, these strong public-private partnerships can get us closer to an Oklahoma where no one goes hungry.
Thank you so much for that, and I appreciate you joining us this evening, Dr. Dykstra. Next up is Dave Lopez with Lopez Foods. Dave is the Vice President, and Lopez Foods is a multi-generational family-owned business. It is also the largest Hispanic-owned protein manufacturer in the United States and operates a state-of-the-art 200,000 square foot facility right here in Oklahoma City. Dave, please tell us a little bit more about the company and what you do at Lopez Foods.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Congresswoman. I'm happy to be here to join the conversation. And I am the VP of Sales and International Business for Lopez Foods in Oklahoma City. Our company has been around for over 40 years. We've grown to 4 production facilities. Lopez umbrella has a beef facility and a pork facility. And we also have 2 chicken facilities under a name called Dorada Foods. So we're often referred to as Lopez Dorada. We employ approximately 2,000 team members across the organization, producing hamburger patties, sausage patties, chicken nuggets, chicken products for food service industry, retail, but mostly the quick service restaurant industry. A little history of the company. My father purchased controlling interest in '92. He's now retired. We've grown quite a bit since then. Additional ownership. I'm proud to be one of the owners of the company, and we have Ed Sanchez leading the company as our CEO. We continue to be a privately held company. Our annual revenue is close to $1 billion per year. And the key to our success, without a doubt, is our people. I would say as a food company, we're focused on food safety and quality, long-term relationships with our key customers who we value greatly. And then we're strong stewards of the environment as well with our sustainability programs. We do an outstanding job of giving back to the communities that we serve. From a charitable standpoint, we focus on the well-being of families, children, personal growth, educational programs, health programs. We have a long list of organizations and nonprofits that we focus on throughout the year, including the Ronald McDonald House, the Latino Community Development Agency, and of course, the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma. And we're happy to be contributors to the food bank through food donations, a board of director memberships, obviously volunteer times of our staff, and other great programs that they participate in. We absolutely love the food bank.
Thank you so much for joining, Dave, and thank you for your commitment to our community as well. And last up is Jeff Ragan with KiZE Concepts. Jeff is the founder and CEO of KiZE, an Oklahoma City-based healthy lifestyle company with a mission, passion, and purpose to change lives through food, service, and charity. KiZE's flagship product is the KiZE bar. If you haven't had one, check it out at your local grocery or convenience store. It's a gluten-free, non-GMO energy bar with life-changing and give-back components. So Jeff, welcome. Thank you for being with us this evening. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and that give-back component of KiZE.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having us. Super honored to be here as a proud Oklahoman. It's exciting when everybody gets involved to make a change for our people. So thanks for your time. KiZE is a company started about 7 or 8 years ago with, like you said, a passion to change lives for the better through food service and charity. We really just believe in loving people well, seeing the needs and feeding the needs, if you will. We make energy bars, started hand making, hand molding. We've been blessed and fortunate to grow and have a facility just west of downtown Oklahoma City, actually across from the largest homeless day shelter. So we get to interact with a lot of people facing hunger challenges every day. So it's something we're really passionate about. But we're just excited to live in our great state and our great city and work with great people like yourselves to try and make a difference however we can. So.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for joining us and for being such a community partner in the Oklahoma City area. Again, just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question to one of our panelists this evening, please press *3 and that'll put you in the queue. Before we get to questions, I want to throw a couple of things out to our panelists and let you answer. First of all, Secretary Arthur, what does the recovery look like for farmers and ranchers and ag producers from the pandemic?
Well, it's certainly been very challenging. Here in the United States, we operate off of this just-in-time food supply that works extremely well until it's interrupted. And we saw that interruption, and that caused a lot of cascading and kind of domino effects for all of our producers. So where they were planning to take that product, be it protein or produce, a lot of those avenues were changed and a lot of those avenues were shut off. And so a lot of our producers had to pivot whatever their production practices were. The markets were incredibly volatile last year. We had a lot of stress in the protein sector, as I'm sure all consumers saw, and certainly everyone on this call understands the stress that we saw there. So the positive is our producers are certainly very resilient. Here in Oklahoma, they're used to unique challenges like dealing with the weather and how the commodity markets can fluctuate. So we've seen a lot of them diversify their operations so that they can spread that risk into other commodities. And we've seen a great increase in connecting with consumers through that local purchasing of products, certainly produce, but also protein. So it was very challenging for several months for our producers, but a lot of them have done a lot of things that have changed their traditional operating practices, which have ultimately benefited them, and we think has really increased the dialogue with consumers and helping people learn about how their food is produced, where it's being produced, and who is producing it. We think is very beneficial for consumers and absolutely for our producers as well.
One of the things I would say is that it's been incredible to see businesses really be able to pivot in a really challenging time. All of you on the call in different ways have had to pivot how you operate, and we certainly saw it in the ag community. Stacy, what federal programs worked for our food banks in keeping people fed over the last year and a half?
Thanks for asking, and you actually did a good job of highlighting a couple of them, but absolutely SNAP allotments, pandemic summer EBT, and the USDA's Farmers to Families programs were collectively vital food resources across our state and across the country. As you may know, that USDA box didn't require any labor. They came prepackaged with the dairy, protein, and produce that you mentioned. And because they didn't have to be sorted or repackaged, distribution was much more efficient and safer for everyone. We actually distributed 5.1 million pounds of Farmers to Family food boxes containing that produce, dairy, and protein. And although the program had some challenges along the way, we are super grateful that those dollars continue to be invested in the food banks through a program called the Emergency Food Assistant Program. We call that TFAP. And TFAP has helped us and other food banks across the United States provide U.S.-grown nutritious food to our neighbors in need of food assistance, keeping our farmers working and our people fed, which we see as a big win-win. And then that pandemic EBT the pandemic EBT program ensured that children didn't go without during school closures. So it was incredibly important as well.
You know, I will say that you saw schools come together and find really innovative ways to make sure that kids were getting nutrition and food during that challenging time. Certainly, my family and I personally have been great supporters of the food bank. We believe in the cause, and we understand the need of our community. But you also saw communities really just stepping up to figure out ways to make sure that kids were getting lunches, whether that was brown paper bagging it and creating drive-throughs to make sure kids were getting breakfast and lunch, or in some cases even deliveries. It was pretty incredible to see the community come together, and you all played an important part in that. So, Dave, I would love to hear your perspective from a large corporation. What was your company's experience during the pandemic, and how did you all pivot?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Very challenging. I'd say the last year and a half has been a difficult challenge, but nothing that we couldn't handle. As with the rest of the country, we had a lot of quick decisions that we had to make early on in the pandemic. Our main goal was to keep our associates safe, and obviously we wanted to make safe food for our customers. We quickly learned that we became designated as an essential workforce, so that meant that our team members could come to work, which was great. In our industry, in the food industry we service, you know, the Uber Eats and the delivery and the takeout was a great thing. So that kept our business flowing, and so we needed to make sure that we not only produce the product, but we can get it out to our customers in their times of need. So like I said, we had to implement new ways or pivot pretty quickly, as you said. And so we implemented new procedures such as masks, the shields that many people have had out there, auto temperature screening for our associates to monitor people who are potentially getting ill, social distancing, the whole gamut. And it worked. I think we did a good job with that. We continued to dive deeper, and we amended our health program, our health plan, to accommodate our team with any type of COVID-19 situation that they had. If they had to go get tested, if they had to be away from work for quarantine, or if they're children, all of that was covered for our team members. We needed them to know that we were in this together, and we were going to get out of this together. And so that was another big pivot that we made. And then finally, I would say one thing that we truly believed that was the right thing to do was to initiate appreciation pay. And that was really to help give our team members, our line workers, a little bit extra pay than their normal base pay because they were, you know, risking their livelihoods effectively to come to work. And, you know, there was a lot of uncertainty at the time, but we wanted to make sure that they knew we were there for them. And so we felt that was an important thing to do. We had a lot of other, from an industry standpoint, you know, supply chain opportunities that a lot of people have heard about. We had to deal with that. We're fortunate to be a part of one of the biggest supply chains in the world with one of our major customers, and they're ranked and recognized as one of the best in the world. So that really did help play into our ability to make sure we kept the lines running. We didn't run out of raw materials. packaging supplies. So we were fortunate at that front, but we certainly felt that stress within our industry. As Secretary Arthur was saying, we felt all that as well.
It was certainly an interesting time, especially in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, to see the shortages across the country, certainly in proteins, but also companies like yours stepping up to the plate, finding ways to be innovative and making sure that processing was still happening so people had things to buy at the grocery when they were able to get there. So,
Yes.
Jeff, tell me a little bit about how COVID-19 impacted your business and what you all continue to do to help the community over the last year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah, it was very difficult. Being a younger, growing company in kind of a snack setting, I mean, we basically lost a large amount of our business. People weren't going to grocery stores, they weren't buying snacks because they weren't going to the gym or different things. And so we saw very quickly it was going to be pretty negative effect for us. But as he said, you want to take care of your people first and foremost. So I think, once everything kind of settled in, we just asked the question, how can we help? And working with great agencies like the food bank, we actually created a new product to feed to over 1 million kids in Oklahoma, a different size than what we'd made before. But it was a way to get simple, clean, high quality nutrition to people through the backpack program to help our kids. And then we had a lot of inventory that wasn't going at the same rate as expected. And so just really doing a lot of stuff to try and serve our different frontline workers around here, particularly those in healthcare and different hospitals initiative, but as well as around the country. We open it up to our customers. Hey, if you know any people that just need food, work schedules changed a lot, not just for healthcare people, but truck drivers. We get truck drop-offs every day. So just trying to find ways to help with what you have. But I think, you take care of your people, you try to use what you have to help, and, problems will always be there. But if you have people that are willing to come together and find good solutions, we feel like we can always use our resources to make a difference.
Well, you're doing great work over there. And certainly you mentioned the backpack program that the Regional Food Bank puts together. And it's an incredible opportunity for us as a community, and certainly you being part of that to help our kids on weekends and times when they're not in school, ensure that they have, food options or healthy food options as well. So thank you for what you're doing to support the community. Secretary Arthur, I want to throw it back to you for just a minute. Can you talk a little bit about the state programs or initiatives that are helping in this particular with this particular issue? And also, what could be done on the federal level to help our farmers and ranchers and ag producers as we look to the future?
Certainly. At the state level, we're very fortunate, and I say state, but the dollars actually came from the federal level when we've talked about the challenges we had in the protein sector. We had funds that went out to support our small and medium-sized processors here in the state of Oklahoma. So we had over 40 of those facilities that received funds to either expand their facility itself or to expand their freezer capacity on the protein side. And so that is red meat and poultry that we're able to do that. We have an additional 19 facilities that are coming online before the end of the year. So those CARES funds were going out to all across the state of Oklahoma to help those facilities expand. And certainly you mentioned earlier, Congresswoman Bice, our Healthy Food Financing Initiative. Those funds travel through the Department of Ag here at the state level. And so you see those in those local markets and farmers markets that were mentioned. And so we have been working in tandem with our partners at USDA to make certain that we are getting these small and medium-sized processors and producers access to consumers. And so those programs, some of those come through us here at the Department of Ag. Some of those travel through the Department of Human Services, which was mentioned earlier, but lots of support through those USDA programs specifically to help navigate through these issues. So it's really a partnership between state resources, our staff here at the Department of Ag to connect with those producers and those dollars to alleviate some of the hiccups that we've seen.
it's great insight. And I would also maybe add or piggyback onto what you were mentioning. When you're talking about food insecurity, it doesn't just impact a certain demographic. It's everything from children to seniors. And we saw senior nutrition programs also have to sort of pivot during this time of COVID and really figure out how do we serve that population need and keep them safe, because it is certainly was a vulnerable population. To wrap up again, if you'd like to ask a question, just a reminder to press *3, and we'll get to those questions in just a couple minutes. But Stacy, what lessons and takeaways have you learned during this pandemic that you're applying to emergency food distribution as we work to recover?
Well, one example, and the supply chain was kind of alluded to earlier, and all the challenges that folks have faced on that, and that waiver flexibility that we were given has allowed us to make needed substitutions and maintain that nutritional quality that's so important. And so we are really hoping those waivers might become permanent in that next iteration of the federal child nutrition reauthorization. It's a great way to ensure that we can feed children efficiently and barrier free, as you mentioned, to avoid those hiccups, as we call them. And the other thing is just looking for new ways to partner. The reality is this is too big for any one person to address. And so we are always looking for partners that we can connect with and distribute food in clever ways to make sure we're getting access to people who need it. When you talked about seniors, we have a new relationship with Embark now, and they're helping us get food to seniors that are homebound. So that's an example of just one of many ways we've had to pivot and reach out to folks for help.
Fantastic. Well, this is a great discussion. I'm grateful to each of you for participating. And I'd like to open it up for questions to the audience. Again, if you have a question specific to a member of our panel, you can address them directly, or if it's just for any of the panelists, please state your question, press *3 to be placed in the queue. But at this time, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The first question will be from Jennifer from Tecumseh. She has a question about the drop in food security and how small farmers could help fix that problem. Jennifer, go ahead with your question.
First of all, Representative Bice, I want to thank you for your efforts in this area. Considering the drop of food security and the disruptions of supply lines that we all saw due to COVID, small farmers selling directly to their local community would mitigate the problem greatly in a future pandemic or something like that. However, the USDA and FDA regularly create regulations that stifle this solution. What can be done at the federal level to stop this, and what can we do at the local or state level to overcome this burden on small farmers?
It's a great question. And I'm probably going to guess that Secretary Arthur has a little bit of perspective on this. Blayne?
Sure.
I can't hear
and
you.
thank you very much for the question. And there is no doubt that we saw our smaller producers had some more flexibility and ability to really pivot and change through the challenges we saw last year. And we always say there's room for all sizes of producers. It's kind of a big tent. There we've got small, medium, and large size. But certainly what we see is a lot of the regulations that come either from FSIS or from FDA, and FSIS is under the USDA umbrella. Those really cause some challenges for our smaller producers, depending on their staffing levels and the paperwork that comes along with that. So we here at the state level are in constant communication with USDA so that we can look at tiered options when we're talking about if it's licensing fees or requirements for HACCP guidelines for different facilities, so that we can have an option that's workable for every size of producer. And Jennifer, to your question, at the state level, the state legislature did some really good things this last year in regards to regulations for a lot of our smaller producers, and certainly those that are selling directly to consumers, and rolled back some of that red tape. We know sometimes that's a little bit of a longer process at the federal level, and we understand and respect that. So we always want to keep food safety as a priority, but we want to find a way for these smaller producers to really access those markets in a reasonable fashion without having to jump through a multitude of hoops. Here at the Department of Ag here in Oklahoma, we have lots of cooperative agreements with USDA, which really gives us the opportunity to engage with them on a state level. What works, what doesn't work, and how can we work towards things that make more sense with always our ultimate goal of feeding people and getting that nutritious and affordable product to consumers.
It's a really great question. And I'll sort of add to that I think, my job as a member of Congress is to really break down some of those barriers. Again, to your point, making sure that we're focused on food safety, but also allowing for some flexibility. Oftentimes, government regulations tend to be very rigid, and we saw some of the red tape, if you will, loosened during the pandemic to allow for flexibility, as Dr. Dykstra mentioned. And I think that that's something that we continue to evaluate as we made some of those changes during the pandemic. What can we keep and continue to keep food safety a priority? So thank you for that. Next question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have an online question from Roy, and he asked, how do you think the invasion of our southern border or the importation of Afghan refugees will impact our already large homeless population and those who are hungry who use the services in Oklahoma City?
Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I can jump in with a little bit of information and just say that Catholic Charities is the lead in terms of addressing the need as people come into our community. And so we are really leaning on them to, as the leaders, to let us know when they need help with food. And so they're doing that same thing and facilitating that, with all of the different resources that our community has to make sure that people get connected to resources.
Yeah, I know that Catholic Charities has been really involved, especially with the Afghan refugee resettlement, in trying to find placement as well as helping with food distribution as well. As far as folks that are crossing to the border, I haven't heard a lot about specifically those needs yet. I certainly have been seeing the numbers, as have all of you, of the folks that are coming into the country, and it could become a situation that will be more prevalent within our communities. And one thing that I know for certain is that our nonprofits and faith-based communities really do step up to the plate and try to fill the gap when needed to make sure that folks are taken care of. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question comes from Rachel in Oklahoma City. She has a question about the free lunch program at your child's school. Rachel, you're on the call. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you to Representative Bice and to the panelists as well for this call today. My question is for Representative Bice. I read online recently where you were proud to have helped remove the free lunch program for your children's school. Do you care to explain that statement?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Rachel. I think there was a mischaracterization of what I did, actually. My children attended a small private school, and what I found out was the cafeteria manager was having a very difficult time meeting the nutritional requirements of the free and reduced lunch program. In 2008 timeframe, it was modified in a way that, candidly, it was incredibly difficult to create lunches. When you have a small school that doesn't have a dietitian on staff, doesn't have access to those resources, and you're trying to create a weekly meal that, for example, has 12 ounces of protein, but no more than 4 ounces when serving, and 4 cups of vegetables, but no more than 2 of them can be green and low sodium, it became very challenging. And because of that, some schools are turning to processed foods and canned foods because it's the only way that they can really figure out how to meet the requirements. Let me be clear. I want to make sure that every child in this state never goes hungry. And that's why I have been such a big supporter personally of the regional food bank, backpack programs, volunteering my time and my family as well to make sure that we're doing our part. The change that I championed in my child's school was actually to reduce the loss that the school was uh, seeing in the free and reduced lunch program of dollars, and to bring it internal. And so we actually subsidize the program internally rather than relying on the federal government. And for us, we actually became break even rather than losing about $9,000 a year as a small private school. And we were still feeding every kid that needed it breakfast and lunch and snacks throughout the day. So I appreciate you asking the question. I know it came up recently, but know that I am here to make sure that Oklahomans do not go hungry. Next, we have another question.
Yes, I'm actually, so we have Jackie Floors from Oklahoma City. Jackie, you are live.
Hi, I have a question for Jeff at KiZE. I've had your products and love them, and my nephews love them, and I've noticed that a lot of kids love them in my family, both my sisters, foster parents, and in my community, you know, food is an issue, but healthy food and nutritious food is an issue. And so my question for you is, you know, how important is that? And do you have any ideas of how to get more clean and nutritious food to kids in our community, knowing that the backpack program is great, but a lot of our kids are homeless or their parents are, so they don't always get to go to school and things like that.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for the call. And something I'm actually really passionate about, obviously kids, but other people, you know, adults as well, being homeless. I think a big issue that we see is portability. And I think that's something that we relate to as a snack food producer of how can you get something that has the nutritional component of a meal, but doesn't have to be refrigerated or warmed up or stuff like that. So I think we've been working on solutions at KiZE to try and get something that's nutritionally balanced, non-GMO or organic even. I'm even looking at adding probiotics or different fruits and vegetables to help kids, particularly with learning. There's a lot more research with the gut and learning, and so trying to find gut-friendly foods as well for our kids. But I think all the pieces are in play. Everyone's kind of touched on. We've got a great distribution partner in the food bank. We've got great faith-based communities and other people that are interacting on the personal level with those that are hungry. And I think we've just got to find more ways to do that. You know, what we've seen on our end, I know working with the food bank, the constraint is funds. So I think, you know, learning more about the healthy food financing, and I'm not sure what goes into that, but Secretary Arthur or whoever else, you know, can probably educate me. But I think we've got a lot of great producers in the state that are passionate about our state and our people and our kids. And, you know, we don't just believe in calories, but we want to get people nutrition. So I think, you know, at KiZE, we're trying to find ways to get clean, convenient, high quality, non-GMO, organic, gluten-free, tasty stuff that kids will like or adults. And we really feel like that's something that can be sustainable and scalable. It's really just kind of figuring out the funding of that.
And I'll sort of maybe piggyback off of Jeff's comments. You know, kids are actually really paying attention and focusing on healthier eating and healthy lifestyles. I think part of that is just families paying more attention to it. I certainly know that my family, because I sort of love to cook and made a lot of healthy things, recognized that putting really good, nutritious things in their bodies was important. And so highlighting things like KiZE bars is really, I think, a great way to show kids you can have healthy eating habits, but still have something that's really pretty tasty too. So I want to maybe pivot just for a second and jump over to Dave Lopez. You know, I'm curious, how did your relationship with the regional food bank sort of transform during this pandemic?
Well, we continue to work with the food bank on a regular basis. We've had, I think I mentioned before, we've had a member of our company in some form or fashion on their board for, the last 15 or 20 years now. I'm currently on the board as the vice chair. And so, that's one piece. We really did do our part to try and funnel as much of our protein items, our meat items that we could to the food bank that, we were able to send over there so they could, repackage that and get it into the right portion size for those that were in need. In fact, we've been very instrumental in helping them with what they're calling the PPC, which is the Protein Processing Center. And this is a great part of our regional food bank that we all need to be proud of. It's an area that's USDA certified, and they actually take the product in bulk quantity and then repackage it, as I was saying, into redistributable, I guess you could say, right size packages. And so we've been able to guide them and give them some advice in regards to how to manage the USDA and the ready to eat clean area and cleaning processes and the whole gamut. And we've got that expertise. So when appropriate, we can work with them to help, guide them and give them that advice. There's other programs that we work with the food bank. I know the last year and a half we've worked with a program called Over the Road, and they're actually transporting some of our products across the country to strategic locations for them that allow them to backhaul vegetables for the food bank. That's a commodity that they need to get their hands on. We've got a lot of protein here in Oklahoma, but not a lot of vegetables. So through that program and through working with Lopez, we've been able to help, I guess, redistribute some of those vegetables to the center of the country, to Oklahoma. And I think that's been another great program for the food bank. And I'm glad that Lopez Dorado was a part of that program.
It's really good insight. And I'll maybe piggyback off that to ask Dr. Dykstra. I have volunteered many times at the food bank at various events. I love the enthusiasm and the excitement of your coordinators. It's always a fun couple of hours. Tell me the impact of COVID on your processes and programs early on, and how you were able to kind of continue to operate during that time. And then what's happening now on the volunteer front?
Well, thank you for asking, and thank you for volunteering. We do appreciate you and your family's engagement with us. We love our volunteers. And I think if COVID's taught us anything, it's absolutely how valuable our volunteers are. We need volunteers. They help us do this work. There is, as we mentioned, 57 million pounds. That's a lot of food to touch and get back out safely to people. So we sadly had to close up shop and not allow volunteers in at the height of the pandemic. And so, we had Blayne, who came in and provided workers for us so that the same workers were coming in every day to help with that. And we also ended up having to pay some folks. And so we took on that extra cost that was, tough to do, but the right thing to do to make sure we could get food that continued to move through the program. The whole time, we've been so focused on safety and health of the people that work at the food bank and also of the food that's going through the food bank. And we've been really successful at keeping people safe and healthy here. And we're really proud of that. And so as we started opening back up, we now have some volunteers back in the organization, which makes us all so happy. We have limited it to 40 volunteers per shift. We normally could take up to 250. So we've got folks really spread out. Everybody's in a mask. But it's working, and we're able to keep people safe and slowly start getting volunteers back in, because as I mentioned, they are just vital to the success of the food bank and making sure that people have access to food.
And I'm going to give you maybe a shameless plug here. If someone wants to volunteer their time, a couple hours on an evening or a Saturday, how can they do that?
Well, we say, yay. Come on and just go to our website at www.rfbo.org. And there's a big old button that says volunteer. You just click on the button and it'll take you through the process of signing up and picking the date and time that's best for you. And I might remind you, we have evening and weekend shifts. So hopefully it's, easy for anyone to volunteer that wants to.
Fantastic. If you would like to ask a question, please remember you can press *3. Penny, do we have any questions in the queue?
Yes, ma'am. We have a question from Apollo. He asked if you had visited the new Homeland store. I'm sure he's referring to the one in the northeast side of town. And what are your thoughts about that store?
Well, I haven't had the chance to visit the new Homeland location yet. I know they just opened the last week or week and a half, but I'm looking forward to it. That's a rural area that had a tremendous need. They had a couple of grocery stores that unfortunately had to close in the last several years, and they became very quickly, a food desert. And that's a real problem, which is why I championed Senate Bill 506 several years ago to make sure that we were addressing the needs of our communities. And so it is incredibly exciting to see this new store pop up on 36th and Lincoln, and I look forward to being able to stop by and visit it really soon. One more question, maybe for Secretary Arthur. If you can maybe talk a little bit about how farmers and ranchers and our ag producers in general stepped up to the plate during this pandemic. I know you have a unique perspective because you are a farmer and rancher. So.
Well, it certainly was a time that no one had navigated through before. And so we had, I think, a great communication between all of our producers, and always want to be very appreciative of what we refer to as our ag groups here in the state of Oklahoma. So those would be groups like our Cattlemen's Association, Farm Bureau, American Farmers and Ranchers, wheat growers, you name it. All of those groups came together. Very specifically, the Cattlemen's Association very quickly stood up kind of an online option for people to find local beef as we saw issues that they ran into in the supply chain. We also had a lot of producers that were finding ways to get their product, as those supply chains, we turned off half of that supply chain we usually look at when we close those restaurants and hotels, as the food service side was paused for a little bit to protect health and safety of folks. That retail side was really in demand. So a lot of those producers that normally would have pivoted to the other side of that food supply chain were taking products to more of our local farmers markets options, and making sure that there was opportunity for consumers to come directly to them. Thankfully, because of online options, that was a good way for us to connect with folks. And I want to be very appreciative of all of our Made in Oklahoma companies that were very creative in finding ways to keep that product going forward. Our co-packers did a great job of that here in Oklahoma as well. And really, all of our farmers markets across the state found some creative ways to have contactless delivery. And so it was really good communication and collaboration from our producers, directly our farmers and our ranchers, but also we needed that help from our state partners and our federal partners. You mentioned the food boxes at the beginning of the call. All of those things take good communication, and for people to say, even though I've been doing it this way for a long time, I need to change and operate a little bit differently. And they certainly stepped up to the plate and did that over the last year and a half now.
I would say one of maybe the small bright sides of COVID, and there's been a lot of downside, but one of the things many of us have learned in the last 18 months or so is that sometimes a change is good, or it can really give you a new perspective on how to navigate, how to process, what doing things differently can actually look like. And so many of our ag community folks did that in a very short amount of time, and it really paid off. So, Penny, do we have one final question?
Yes, ma'am. We have Amy from Edmond. She has a question about organic food sources. Amy, go ahead with your question. You are live.
Hi, yeah, I'm just wondering, with those that are on the call, if we have any push towards, I love hearing about the nutritious foods and non-GMO. I'm just wondering if that's an actual goal for most food industries, or if that's, I guess that's my question.
Thank you.
Secretary Arthur, do you have any perspective on the GMO piece of that?
Sure, glad to talk about the organic piece and the GMO piece. And kind of to the conversation earlier, we have room for all sizes of producers. We also have room in this big tent for consumers who all have a different focus for what they want to buy. And certainly specifically towards the organic, we're seeing a significant increase in our organic producers. And even here in Oklahoma, because we see that that is a priority for a lot of our consumers. And we've got certainly organic produce growers, but we've also got our protein producers, so like our cattle producers who are doing all grass-fed, all organic beef. We certainly have all types of options in that. But I would say we as producers want to produce a product that the consumers are demanding, and we have continued to see an increased demand on the organic side. We here at the Department of Ag actually certify all of our organic producers here in Oklahoma to make sure that they're meeting all of those requirements to produce that product as organic. I think we'll continue to see an increase in that, but really even more so than the organic, it's that demand for local. That's what consumers are really telling us. They want that local product. They want to be able to meet that producer, and again, to know how that product's being produced.
Well, I can attest to that, Secretary Arthur. I bought a half a side of beef last November, and there is nothing better than a fresh homegrown tomato in Oklahoma. So I agree with that perspective completely. Well, we are about out of time here. I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists who have taken some time this evening to join us for this very important conversation. I also want to remind everyone that tomorrow, September the 17th, is Hunger Action Day, excuse me. And I encourage you to support your local food bank, volunteer at your nearest food pantry, and do something to spread awareness about the issue of hunger and food insecurity throughout our state and our country. If we didn't get to your question tonight, or if you need assistance from one of the organizations that joined us or from my office, after this call, you'll have the opportunity to leave a voicemail with your contact information, and we will get back to you. Or you are always welcome to visit my website at bice.house.gov to submit an email online. Again, thank you to Secretary Arthur, Dr. Dykstra, to Dave Lopez, and to Jeff for joining us this evening. I appreciate your time, and everyone have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.